Hey guys, this has been a video a long time in coming. I've been talking on both of my channels for a long time about what I've learned from that past life regression of mine and my experiences in life ever since. And I wanted to make a video that really does kind of boil down the simple teachings of Jeshua bin Joseph and how they've worked great in my life. They've been incredibly helpful and wonderful in my life. And so I want to dive into what I learned from that past life regression. When I came back from that regression and throughout my life, I've been able to decipher Jeshua's teachings in a way that I was then able to validate through finding the same information in many different sources of spiritual thought, not only in Buddhism and Hinduism and Baha'i and even in modern pulp culture. I was finding the same exact information. I firmly believe God is too big to be encompassed by any one religion. And I believe that religion itself is a construct built around these spiritual principles. And yet, because they are coming from the human mind in the physical world, they're creating these rules and laws and challenges around it, which make it much harder to comprehend. It also takes the power away from the individual and gives it to a deity of some kind. And Jeshua never wanted to be a deity. He never wanted to set himself apart. In fact, it's completely counter to what he believed about our own divinity and what he was actually teaching. You see, Jeshua discovered his divinity. He discovered this oneness that he was able to then realize that every person in the world has the same exact power, the same exact ability. And his entire teachings were based around the idea of we're all equal. We're all one with God. And when you look at what he taught and the way he taught and the things that he said, you can very quickly find this exact truth in his teachings. Greater works than I have done, you will do. It is your faith that heals you. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can ask a mountain to move and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. He was telling us that we have the same ability as he. And they even washed his disciples' feet to show that he was no better than they. He never referred to himself as the Son of God. He always referred to himself as the Son of Man. Being the Son of Man, he was saying he was a human just like the rest of us. But what happened was he discovered this connection to the source. He discovered his oneness with God. And he literally said, take heart, I have overcome the world. Meaning, look, I've found this thing. I'm showing you this expression of yourself that is much greater. And I'm showing it to you. And this is the way, the truth, and the life that you're all capable of living. And that was his teachings. And his teachings broke down to some very simple core principles. And those principles are what I'd like to teach in this course today. So strap in and let's move forward and talk about these very simple and yet core principles to Jeshua's teachings. Let's first talk about Jeshua's belief in oneness, the oneness of God. In the Bible, he says, the Father and I are one. And when he says the Father and I are one, he's not saying that he is the Son of God and exalted above all others. He's saying, I am connected to this oneness of God. In the Bible, he also talks about bringing heaven to earth. It's about becoming that resonance with God, bringing that feeling of that loving God here into the physical presence, bringing heaven to earth. So when you hear him talking about, this bringing heaven to earth, he's talking about being one with God. He's talking about bringing that loving presence of God here on earth. But that oneness is the key element to it, because that oneness itself means that you are part of this greater experience that is creating into the world. And I often say that, we are the inspiration, God is the paintbrush and the canvas. We are literally able to create our experience, and God will give us anything we ask for. Right in the Bible it says, whatever you ask in God's name is granted if you have faith. So it's basically telling you that you and God are working in unison as one. And whatever you believe, it's going to come into to reality. Because one of the fallacies you have to realize is if you come from a Christian background, the word faith does not mean belief. It means belief in Jesus. And I use Jesus in this term because that is the religious word, the Greek word used for Jeshua bin Joseph. In Christianity, faith means belief in Jesus. But in reality, it's a much more simple concept. It simply means belief. It simply means faith. When you pray, believe you shall receive and you shall. So it really comes down to this idea of you and this oneness working together as co-creators in your experience. Jeshua said in that oneness that everything that you're experiencing in your life is part of that oneness. And the people you're interacting with are also part of that oneness. Whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me. That was Jeshua talking about that person across from you is part of you. It's part of that oneness. And in that oneness, you are experiencing God to the fullest. And you're seeing the fears and the anxieties and the separations from that oneness. The more you dive into these concepts of oneness, you find it elsewhere as well. Buddha said, "He who experiences the unity of life sees his own self in all beings." So you come to this place of understanding that even Buddha is talking about everything you're looking at is you, and everything you're experiencing is you, and what you put into that experience, you have the ability to then affect in some positive way. Back in the early days of the internet, I was going to the library to check my emails because it was a new thing. And I went there with a friend of mine, and we were in there. I finished early, and my friend was still inside. And I went out to my truck, and I climbed in my truck. And as I got in my truck, a guy opened the other door, stepped inside, stepped in my truck, sat down, used his elbow to lock the door, and put his hand in his pocket. And I could tell that he was there to rob me. He was there to mug me. And I turned to him, and before he could say anything, I said, "Hi, my friend." I said, "What can I do for you today? How can I help you?" And he looked at me in a very strange way. And I was like, "Yeah, we're all in this life thing together. We're all part of this. How can I help you today?" And he looked at me and he said, "Are you Christian?" And I jokingly said, in the oldest sense of the word, he didn't get my joke, of course, but the more we talked, the more calm he became. His hand came out of his pocket. He asked me to give him a ride to a store. I drove him to a store. I dropped him off. And when I dropped him off, he went into the store. And I said, "Do you need me to take you anywhere else?" He said, "No, I'm good." And I got a phone call on my flip phone back then. And it was my friend at the library. He says, "John, where are you?" I said, "I'm dropping this guy off at the store." He says, "The librarian just saw you drive out of this parking lot with the robbery suspect that they've been having a problem with around the area, and I want to make sure you're okay." I said, "I'm fine," and I drove back to the library. The point of this is when this person got into the car, he was in fear and in anxiety, and so those fears and the anxiety are part of me because I'm part of that oneness of God. And by giving that part of my oneness of God that's fearful, love and compassion, the fear went away. No fear can exist in perfect love. That comes from the book of John. And that idea that we are one with one another, and when we put love into one another, we get love in return. And that oneness is part of it. It's being literally in the awareness that your experience is part of the oneness of God. The more you dive in, you find this oneness again everywhere. I just said Buddha. Now let's look at this one. He who in this oneness of love loves me in whatever he sees, wherever this man may live. In truth, he lives in me. That's Krishna. Since we have created you all from one same substance, it is incumbent upon you to be even as one soul, to walk in the same feet, eat in the same mouth, dwell in the same land, that from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness and essence of detachment may be made manifest. That's Baha'u'llah from the Baha'i faith. So you can find these oneness truths in many different schools of thought. But it really comes down to you taking it into your experience and making it part of your truth, being one with the world, being one with the experiences around you. Understand we live in a collective consciousness, and in that consciousness itself, we are all creating this world. And as I sit here now, I look across the street at my neighbor's house. Now, it's a cute little brick rancher. But a couple weeks ago, he put a blue roof on top of a red brick rancher with white trim. So there's this red, white, and blue house across from my house right now. And it's not very attractive, right? Did I create that into my experience? No. The collective consciousness created that experience. That house was invented or brought into being through the oneness of the architect, the builder, the people who lived in it. And now, me seeing out my window, I'm looking at the oneness of God, realizing that collective consciousness made that house across the street. And so by realizing that I'm part of this oneness of consciousness, I can accept that this is part of the oneness. And I can say, okay, though I do not like the look of this house, I can accept that it's me. And there are some things about my world that I don't like. But I cannot be emotionally attached to it and simply love that it's part of the world, part of the oneness of God, and not get trapped into reacting to other people's beliefs and other people's creations into my experience. That oneness of God and your attachment to what is going on in your world is creating the experience around you. And you coming to this space of realizing that you are one with God means you have much more control over your own personal experience. A part of this oneness is the releasing of fear. So let's jump over to that one, and I'll see you on the other side. Fear. What is fear? Most people can't tell you what fear really is. That I often hear the common phrase, false evidence appearing real. I don't particularly care for that definition myself because I don't think fear comes with evidence. I think evidence is created by fear. Fear, when you really look at it from a scientific perspective, fear is nothing but an emotional reaction to a future event that may or may not happen with you focused on a negative outcome. And I say that specifically, you focus on a negative outcome, because if you weren't focused negatively and you were focused positively, you would not be afraid. So fear depends on you being negatively focused. Fear depends on you choosing to be afraid of some impending outcome that is not to your liking. And so fear, when you break it down even further, is just negatively focused uncertainty. The Buddha said the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. The book of John said God is love, but as I said earlier, the book of John also says no fear can exist in perfect love. And so, in fact, he actually says perfect love expels fear. Krishna, fearlessness is the first characteristic of the godly. To become one with the source, become one with God, to come to the love of God, the first characteristic is to become fearless. Love is the light that dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear. In other words, when you're in your deepest fear, love is always there. But it's a matter of saying, I'm not lost in fear. I can find that love and release my fears, is what Baha'u'llah was saying. Swami Narayan, because I am without fear, he gave me nothing to be fearful for. He was speaking about a lion that was asleep 6 feet away from him. Swami Narayan had this experience of realizing that in this expression of self, in this oneness of God that we've already talked about, what he puts into the oneness of God is the experience he's going to receive. What he's putting into this experience is what he's going to be receiving. And if he puts fear into it, what happens is he gets a fearful response. When he puts the lack of fear, because I'm without fear, he gave me nothing to be fearful for, he gets a beautiful response or a non-fearful response. But our fears themselves are based upon usually past experience and negatively focused uncertainty of the future. So fear is not actually rooted in your present moment. It's rooted in an uncertain future and past experience. There's also this other little element about breath. When we have fear, scientifically we know that the first thing that happens is we store air in our bodies. You watch any horror movie, that person gets a jump scare, the first thing they do is go, right? If you're a parent, you remember that moment where your toddler was walking across the living room, slipped and fell, and almost smacked their head on the table. And you went, you filled your lungs up with air really, really fast. Why did you do that? Out of fear. Why do we have this primal reaction to fear? Because we store air in our lungs so we have the capacity to run further and faster. That's the primal response. One of the things about fear that is so interesting is that when you exhale, you actually can shut off the fear response. Actors on stage are trained, if they forget their lines, they've got 1,000 people staring at them, they're trained to exhale, relax all their muscles. All of a sudden, all their lines come rushing right back into their heads. Why does this work? Because the fear response comes with a survival response. And the survival response says, when we are in fear, drop everything else and let's just figure out the way to get out of here. So your mind cannot go to the lines in the play. It also makes us not be able to think clearly because our body's in survival mode. They're throwing away superfluous thought. And so the idea of this is that by being able to let ourselves exhale, we literally are coming back to a fearless state. And when you release fear, you're coming back to your pure state, and your natural state is love, because that's our baseline. That's what we're coming from. We're part of God, and God is love. So by being part of God and being part of that essence of God, our natural state is a loving state. The Buddha said, breath by breath, let go of fear, expectation, and anger. In the Bible, they literally call it the breath of God. And then I've often said in many of my videos and many of my private sessions that I do, that God is found at the bottom of every breath. Right there is that feeling of relaxation, that feeling of God, that feeling of our oneness with the source is right there. What hides that oneness is our fears and anxieties. And by releasing our fears and anxieties, we come back to that oneness. So it goes back to that oneness of God that I was talking about earlier. Our fears are the obstructions which allow us not to see that oneness within ourselves. And that oneness within ourselves is key to realizing that we get to choose whether we're fearful or joyful. And that's really the expression of life, is to come back to the idea of you are the one creating the experience. God is found at the bottom of every breath, as I said, but it's a simple feeling. And in that simple feeling resides no fear, no worry, no frustration, just a simple feeling of freedom. And in that freedom, you can explore the infinite. In that freedom, you can explore the joyful space of just being free. And that's where you find the oneness of God. That's where you find God herself, himself, itself. I don't think there's gender in God, and I don't think Jeshua thought there was gender in God. God was one. In the Bible, they use the word Father. That's because those books, those writings come from a patriarchal time 2,000 years ago. There is no gender in God. There is no gender in our oneness. It's we're all one. And we're beautifully expressed in gender. We're beautifully expressed in race and creed and color and all these things. But it's all one. And it comes down to this oneness expression of being love for all. And when you can do that, you can create a world around yourself that is beautiful. I often say to people who are openly seeking spirituality, the majority of them are highly empathic people. And highly empathic people really want to save the world. Well, you can't save the world, but you can make your part of the world so bright that the world chooses to save itself around you. And that's how we save the world, is by enlisting others to live as you do, by being the oneness of love in God and expressing that oneness of love in God so that they can feel good and relax around you and come back and understand, well, why do you feel so good? And then you can share with them why you feel so good. And that's how we change the world. Coming back to the oneness of us all and just loving everyone. I leave you this one commandment: love one another. So we just talked about fear, and fear is a thought. It's an idea. We think certain things, and so we have a fear-based response. But thoughts are creative, and that is one of the elements of Jeshua's teachings that is very prevalent and once again found in many different schools of thought. What you think you become, you create your world, Buddha. As a man thinketh, so is he. Jeshua bin Joseph in the Bible. All that we are is a result of what we have thought. We are made of our thoughts. We are molded by our thoughts. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. The physical is the illusion. The spiritual is the nature. The mind is the obstruction. This came through in a private session I did for someone. One of the channeled writings I did, this was in one of the private sessions. Let me read it again. The physical is the illusion. The spiritual is the nature. The mind is the obstruction. And if you think about that concept of we get in our head about certain things, we come back to the mythological story of Adam and Eve. And I say mythological on purpose because it's a mythological story of Judaic history, Judaic religion. I say it's a mythological story because it is a mythological story of Judaic religion. It's a story to teach something. But the interesting thing I find in that story is this. They ate from the tree of knowledge. They got kicked out of paradise. They got in their heads and out of their hearts. They got in their heads and out of their hearts. They ate from the tree of knowledge and got kicked out of paradise. Paradise is a subjective feeling. I know a lot of people who think that paradise would be living on a mountaintop somewhere. For me personally, it's living on a beach and having the ocean right in front of me. So it's the feeling that these things engender. For me, being at the beach and have a feeling of just freedom of being there, right? So the feeling in the heart. But when we get into our heads and we start wrapping rules and laws and dogmas, either New Age or Old Age, we start to lose our path. We start to lose our understanding that it's all far simpler. In fact, in my past life regression, I literally said under hypnosis, it's so simple we have a hard time comprehending it. That we are creating the experience with our very thoughts about our present moment. So here's another one that came through one of my private sessions. The layers of belief, be they new or old, are the barriers that keep you wandering in the wilderness. When you seek a path is laid before you, but until you turn the path back to yourself, you never find the doorway. We are often looking for ways to find God or seeking our connection to that oneness of God. And oftentimes we'll go down these ideas, these religious beliefs, these spiritual thoughts, these divination tools, tarot cards, crystals, all these things, when in reality they all work. They all work because we believe they work. Their belief brings that into reality. But the reality of it is they don't need any of it. They don't need any of it. And you start seeking a path, you'll go down the path and you will find all the evidence of that path. And science itself is a dogma because scientists create theories, and theories are their belief, and then their belief starts to show empirical evidence in the solution of belief that surrounds us. So science itself is a dogma as well. When you start looking at the world from the perspective of the belief being creative, then you start to understand that there's a whole different perspective out there. Now, science, interestingly enough, is starting to prove that thoughts are creative. Noetic science has been able to measure thought waves. They have also been able to say that when they focus those thought waves at a specific point, those waves stop there, and they believe something's happening there. They just can't prove it yet. But they're right on the cusp of proving that thoughts are creative. And once again, now that's their belief. So they will see the truth of it. They will see the belief expressed in front of them because they believe it. right? And the more they believe it, the more that will be expressed in front of them. So our creative self is part of this greater illusion. You know, the first lines of the book of John, best book in the Bible, by the way. First lines of the book of John, in the beginning is the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Our words, our thoughts, our beliefs go out to this source, and the source shows us the belief around us. We know scientifically that everything that we're looking at is nothing but atomic energy in motion. I mean, when you look across the room, that wall over there is made of atoms in motion. Every scientist in the world will tell you that. That atomic energy that is in motion over there, because it's energy in motion. In fact, Einstein would call it an energy event, something going on, something happening there, right? Now, noetics are proving that our thoughts can be made waves within this energy. But when you're looking at that wall and you're looking at that atomic energy over there, you have to realize something else, that the air between you and that wall is also made of that same atomic energy. The air is also atoms, oxygen and hydrogen atoms, right? Right there. And guess what else? The eyes that you're looking at it with, also made of atoms. It's all made of this energy in motion. All you really are is your consciousness, your belief. And this is what Jeshua taught, that the outer expression of the world is your belief being shown to you in this energy event. It's like, you're here for opening night every moment of your life. And the opening night is the show around you. And the show around you, you're producing. You're the producer of by your simple belief. And I mean belief about your present moment. And most people will walk through their life thinking this is the way life is. 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 And they'll say it over and over again. And so their life never changes, and they suffer with the same struggles they've always had, and they are a victim to their past experiences. The reason this is happening is because they've never taken control of their thought. They've never come to the moment of saying, I am moving into something different. They have to come to this place of being very present. Your present moment thought is an expression of all of your thoughts. Where you are right now is the culmination of everything you've thought behind you. But when you go, instead of saying this is how things are, you say this is how things have been. But now I am doing this. You start shifting your perspective into creating your life as opposed to stagnating your life. You can be in stagnation mode or creation mode. It really is up to you. Another way I like to put this is you can be an action hero or a reaction zero. You can be acting in creation of your life, or you can be reacting to all the experiences of your life. It's really up to you to make the choice. The Buddha said, what we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts builds our life of tomorrow. Our life is the creation of our mind. If a man speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering will follow him as the wheel of the cart follows the beast that draws the cart. If a man speaks or acts with pure mind, joy follows him as his own shadow. It literally comes down to you are creating your experience through your thoughts, through your beliefs, and through your relationship to it. Now, a lot of those past relationships are based in fear, which is what we talked about before. So it comes down to the space of training your thoughts. We don't travel through time. Time travels through us. People will often sit in their present moment looking ahead of themselves saying, I'm going to, I want to, I'm trying to, I'm hoping to. And in reality, you never get to the future. The future is just a place where you set goals for your next present moment. You have never experienced a moment that wasn't your present one. Your past is just a collection of present moment memories with a subconscious underlying belief. But your present moment, being very present, right here, right now, realizing that you are never out of this moment. You only live one moment, and it's your present one. And this present moment is the pinpoint of creation. It's the place where you get to choose. You get to create your experience from this point forward. And by choosing this experience from this point forward, you then are the inspiration that God gives you the illusion of. And so you have to get very present if you want your life to be different. You have to come to this space and release the past. It's like being the author of your life. You've been writing this book, you've been writing this book, you've been writing this book, and so far the book sucks. Or it's great. It may be one or the other. But if you've got all these things in your past that have been hard, when do you put a period at the end of that chapter? When do you decide that was that part of your life and now you're doing something different? When do you literally decide that you're no longer writing a tragedy, you're now writing a comedy? When do you decide that? Because you're the one who decides it. And if you say this is how life is, you're continuing writing the same book as it was before. You can flip this script and turn it into a beautiful, joyful, loving life just by choosing to believe it and starting to act upon it. In the concept of creation, your thoughts, words, and deeds are creating the experience. But all of those thoughts, words, and deeds only happen in your present moment. The book of Isaiah, forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. Buddha says, do not dwell on the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. Krishna says the wise man lets go of all results, whether good or bad, and is focused on action alone. Deepak Chopra, in the process of letting go, you lose many things of the past, but you will find yourself. And what you find in finding yourself, you will find this idea of I am a creator. I am literally empowered. Jeshua's teachings were all about being empowered, not needing to be ruled, which is one of the reasons he ended up on a cross, is because the Romans don't like when somebody said they don't need to be ruled. That's why it was a very political thing to do, is get rid of that guy because he's being a problem with our rule. And so the idea of Jeshua's teachings is that you are the creator of your experience. You are the one that is able to create the loving world. You're the one who can release your fears and anxieties, and you are the one who can do these things only in your present moment, only in the here and now. And by being in the here and now, you get to choose. Question is, what are you choosing? Are you choosing a life of being a victim of your past? Or are you choosing a life of creating a joyful future? But it all comes down to you making that simple choice, being the creator of your experience. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can ask a mountain to move and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Well, if nothing's impossible for you, why would you focus on fear, anxiety, and being a victim? If nothing's impossible for you, that's kind of silly. It's kind of silly to create more of a negative life when you can literally, in this moment, create a happy life, a joyful life. Joy, happiness, euphoria, the expression of just absolute bliss is God. End of chapter. No kidding. It's God. If God is love, love feels good. Fear feels bad. And so if God is love, then being in a joyful, happy, loving state is expressing God, because God is love. God is not on a cloud looking down on us. God is not some high exalted figure. God is you, and you are God, and the Father and you are one, and the Mother and you are one. And that being the case, you're co-creators in the experience, but God, the source, is nothing but love. And the Bible says, whatever you ask in God's name is granted. And when you look at that idea, if I am declaring about my present moment, my I am moment, that I am a victim, I'm going to experience life of being a victim. I am joyful. I'm experiencing a joyful life. And that is really the key element. Your experience is a product of belief. And you can believe it sucks, or you can believe it is a joyful, happy experience, or that you're creating a joyful, happy experience. That is how life has been. But now I am creating a joyful, loving, happy life surrounded by people who I love, who love me in return. abundantly experiencing the world in ways that I have never done before, but now I'm joyful and happy to receive. That's a very different belief than my life sucks because I had an abusive parent, or I had issues in my past, and I can, those issues in your past are quote unquote in your past. They're unchangeable. You can't go back there and make them not happen. You have to acknowledge that they did happen and then let them go. Release your attachment to the past. Stay in the present. Here and now, that's not happening. Here and now, I am creating something different. Here and now, my future is geared towards creating a joyful, happy life. Set your heart on doing good. Do it over and over again, and you will be filled with joy. Buddha. This concept of being filled with joy is something that from my past life memories of this guy, he was always laughing. He was always joking. He was always playing with children. He was always teasing his wife. And yes, he had a wife. He literally called her Ishti, which is the Aramaic word for wife. He literally was joyful and happy. And he would get you laughing, which is, what is a laugh? A laugh is a joyful exhale. It's a joyful release of all your fears and anxieties. That's what a laugh is. And he would get you laughing, and then he would drop a spiritual truth in right behind it so that it would sink into your soul, and that you would get that understanding even more clearly because you weren't judging it out of fear as it came out of his mouth. That joyful expression, Buddha always has a smile on his face, doesn't he? That joyful expression in life, you start to realize that you're part of this oneness of God, that life can be fearless, that your thoughts are creating an experience. And my favorite Buddha quote of all time, when you realize how perfect everything is, you'll tilt your head back and laugh at the sky. That laughter, that joyful expression of self, is the expression of God here in the physical. And the more you can express that God here in the physical, you start to have the absolute experience of understanding that you are creating the experience. Creation. What you think you become, you create your world. You create your world. You are literally the creator of your experience. And the law of attraction and all of those thoughts of these quote-unquote physical laws, these spiritual laws, the second you hear the word laws, the first thing you should do is you should let them go, because the reality of it is even the idea of laws is of the mind of man. It's far more simple. It's far more simple. The simplicity of God and Jeshua's teachings is that you're one with God and you create your experience, be it good, bad, and you only create it in your present moment. And fear is the illusion of not being in love, not being with love, not having love, and love is God. So it's the illusion of being separate. Now, why do we have this illusion of being separate? Because that illusion of being separate itself is an opportunity to come to know love more fully. Because you could never fully understand God, love, source, consciousness, without understanding its opposite. In science, they would call that a baseline. You need to have this experience of separation to understand and comprehend love more fully. And when you do this, this concept of your own creation becomes more apparent. And as Buddha said, you'll laugh at the sky, because you'll start to understand that you are the oneness of God. You are the creation. You are the one who's empowered. And when we talk about the law of attraction, or creation, as it were, and creation is in any aspect of your life, healing, you can create healing. You can create abundance. You can create all these various things. The book, The Secret, they focused on the abundance, on the money aspect of it. But healing's the same thing. It's just simply creation, our belief in it, how it creates. And so when we start thinking about this idea of our thoughts being creative, the one key element that you've got to realize is there's two kinds of thought. There's conscious and subconscious. And those subconscious mind bubble up from our past because, as I said, the past is a collection of present moment memories. And we have this underlying subconscious belief that bubbles into our mind. Meditation, people talk about, they sit down to meditate and then thoughts will bubble up into their head. Well, those thoughts is the subconscious mind pushing things up. And the reality of it is that you can release those thoughts. And the people who become very good meditators are the ones who go through the process of releasing those thoughts until the quiet times in between last longer. But most people will have those thoughts bubble up, they'll push it aside, have a thought bubble up, they'll push it aside, and after the third or fourth time, they'll say, I can't meditate. But in reality is, if they would have just stayed with it and kept doing it, then what would happen is you would end up being in that space of meditation. It's the same thing with creation. Those subconscious thoughts come up, and your job is to release that subconscious thought. Now, the subconscious thoughts that are coming in are fear-based. There's a fear related to it, which is, you can always tell when you're thinking something fearful, because whatever you're thinking is not present moment active. And it shows up with words like wanting, needing, hoping, trying, wishing, can't, and the most insidious one, how. Because all of them are the belief that it's not happening now. It's not coming into your experience. This is about motion. Creation is motion. You think it and it starts moving towards you. It comes into focus as it gets closer to you, and then you experience it. And when you're looking at that experience and you're bringing that expression into your life, that experience itself is the product of the belief and the creation. It's the creation of your belief. And so you have to start looking at your subconscious mind and what it's really saying about your present moment. And one of these red flag words pops up: wanting, needing, hoping, trying, wishing, can't, or how. You should look at that and then negate it. And the way you negate it, there's two different ways to negate it. One of them is less helpful than the other. A lot of people will have one pop up and they'll go, I'll say something like, well, I hope I'm going to, no. Why'd I say hope? I'm so dumb. Why'd I say hope? Oh, I'm so dumb. And they beat themselves up in the next moment. Well, beating themselves up in the next moment is wasting the next moment. But in reality, you are only wasting the moment that you have. And so when you look at that experience and it comes up, instead of going, oh, I'm so dumb, why'd I say that? Look at that and go, I am the creator of my experience, and just create that silly. That's a silly thing, and you laugh at it. No, I'm not doing that. I'm doing this, right? I laughed at it. What is a laugh? A laugh is a joyful exhale. That joyful exhale releases the fear associated with that thought. You're actively telling your subconscious mind that thought is no longer valid, and taking the fear out of it that's associated with it, that's having that thought pop up in the first place. So now you've got a laughter moment with a negation being dropped into your subconscious mind. You have a fearless moment going in behind that belief, and which has just been negated. So you've just told your subconscious mind, we don't believe that anymore, and this is our new base, this fearlessness. But then you follow that up with, I am joyfully doing this. God's name is I am. Whatever I ask in God's name is granted. Moses said it was I am. So I am doing this is telling God, telling the source, telling consciousness that that's what's coming into my experience. I am that I am. I am being that. Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. You have to be the I am. You have to live the I am. And when you catch yourself subconsciously thinking something contrary to what you are creating, laugh at it. Tilt your head back. Laugh at this guy. I'm not doing that. I am doing this. And I'm bringing myself back to this state of creating my experience. And that's everything I'm talking is what Jeshua taught. Everything I'm telling you right now is what Jeshua taught. It's a much bigger perspective than religions have, because religions try to control it and bring it down to their structure. It's bigger. It's broader. God is too big to be encompassed by any one religion. And what Jeshua taught, and Buddha taught, and Krishna taught, and Swaminarayan, Baha'u'llah, Muhammad, what they all taught was this oneness with God, this loving one another. The Muhammad said, he who knows not kindness has no faith. And the Dalai Lama says, my religion is simple. My religion is kindness. Being the love in the present moment is creating the love into your experience. When you do what you love, the money comes. All of those experiences of creating your life by choosing things that are loving and joyful into your life, you get those experiences. You create that into your experience through your thought. Your thoughts are the element of your experience. And those thoughts are under your control. You get to choose. And it really takes you choosing to do it. When you come to that space of just simply choosing, you start to realize that I can create a joyful life. I can create motion. You know, in the Bible, the first miracle was the water and the wine. And Jeshua's mother comes and says, well, they're out of wine. And Jeshua says, Mom, it's not time yet, right? And then he turns and says, fill those jugs with water. Place the jugs over there where they'll collect wine. And then he gets up, he goes over and it's wine. Jeshua understood the experience was coming into his life. The experience of wine. Mom, it's not time yet because the wine's not here, but it's coming. So what did he do next? He turned, he said, fill those jugs with water. Why did he do that? So that the wine had some place to appear. His thoughts, words, and deeds were in alignment with wine being in that room. And then he says, put those over there where they're going to collect wine. In other words, I'm making wine, and over there's where the completion of where they're going to drink it. And so he has full thought all the way to completion in the oneness of God, thought, words, and deeds that bring about wine. So it's forever in motion. It's forever flowing. The atomic energy you're looking at is in motion. And that future expression, that future experience is coming towards you. You don't get to it. It comes towards you depending on what you believe about your present moment. And when you just start listening to the words you use, and I said earlier, the beginning is the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Your thoughts go out to this source, and the source shows you your thoughts in the image around you. We are literally created in God's image. And by being in God's image, the image that God is showing us is our belief. And we get to choose. We get to step into that role of creator and choose our belief, choose our expression, and witness it come into reality. Because that's what was promised. Nothing will be impossible for you. You can ask mountains to move and it'll move. It literally comes down to you saying, I can move a mountain. I can change anything. I can create it. Now, the toughest part about this is all that subconscious belief. You know, there's a very famous Buddhist quote, life is suffering, but it's a mistranslation. That translation is a mistranslation because when they translate it correctly from the conceptual language of Pali to the literal language of English, and then they take the translation and they make it a concept like the original language would do, the actual translation is life is suffering because of our habitual response to our past experience. So it's a matter of changing habit. Now, scientists will tell you, hypnotherapists and psychotherapists will tell you habit is created by continual action for a minimum of 21 to 60 days. So you have to continually press those thoughts back for 3 weeks before you even get started. So for 3 weeks, you're creating this new habit of believing that a joyful life is coming to your experience, believing your health is coming to your experience. And the more you can believe, the faster it comes. But, I use the analogy quite often about a 1,000-pound man who can't see his shoes. So he knows they're down there. You just can't see them. He has a hard time believing he's thin. So the use of affirmations doesn't work for him because he has what's known as a cognitive dissonance. He's saying one thing, but thinking another. And as Shakespeare said, words without thoughts never to heaven go. Your words have to have belief behind them. When she said they're out of wine, he said, Mom, it's not time yet. Place the jugs over there. When he said place the jugs over there, he believed that wine was going to happen at that point. He put the thought into it, the belief into it, the truth into it. And when that happened, it truthfully became wine. And so it really comes down to the idea of realizing that we get to create our experience in co-creation with God, and that we have the ability, just as Jeshua did, to do that. I could tell you story after story of manifestations in my life, but I'll tell you this one simple one. I one time said, "Thank you, God, for the world travel I'm receiving." That afternoon, I was asked to do USO shows. That year, I went to Iceland, England, Norway, Germany, Belgium, and Holland. And eventually I went to a full 16 countries, including the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan. Then somebody else contacted me and said, "I want to take you to Egypt." And I spent 20 days in Egypt. Then somebody else contacted me and said, "I want to take you to Peru." Then that guy ended up taking me to Israel, Greece, and Jordan. I've been to 30 countries now. I paid to go to one. Paid to go to one. I never asked to pay for it. I am receiving world travel. I put my belief into that outcome, and that outcome has shown up in my life. Now, of course, creation itself is a choice, and you've got to choose it. But the cool part about it is you get to choose it here, now, in this present moment. Your present moment thoughts, words, and deeds are creating your experience. Jeshua's simple teachings, starting with that oneness of God. You are one with God. You are the creative element of God. There is not a deity above you. It's equal. You're one with God, and God is your equal. There is no hierarchy in infinity. You're all one. So you come back to that oneness. Fear is the illusion of not being attached to that oneness or not being connected to that oneness, not feeling our spiritual connection. And by releasing that fear, we come back to the space of our oneness with God, our source. We come back to that ability to realize that we are creators of the experience. And the way we create is through our own thoughts. Our thoughts of fear and anxiety give us thoughts of fear and anxiety. Our thoughts of joy and love and excitement and positivity bring that experience into our life. But that only happens in the here and now, in this present moment. By coming back to this present moment and realizing you are one with God's and your thoughts are creative, and specifically thoughts about the only moment you ever live, this present one. What you're thinking about this moment is the outcome you're going to achieve. And that's the important part of this, is people will often not realize what they're thinking about their present moment. So you start to pay attention to what you're thinking by just listening to the words. And are the words joyful or happy? And realizing that God is love and love is joyful. And so when you want that connection, it's a matter of coming back to that laughter, coming back to that joy, coming back to that expression of yourself. And in that, you are creating, and you're creating through that belief, and you get to choose that belief. Jeshua's whole teachings were, ye are gods. Ye are gods. He said that right in the Bible. Ye are gods. You have the ability of the gods. You have the ability of being able to create. You are the children of God. You are literally part of God. You're coming from God. You're an expression of God. And when you respond to God as God would respond to you out of love and compassion, then you get it into your life. And no one can take it away from you. Because if you are truly in that fearless state and loving your life, fearful things go away. You know, when the wrong thoughts go away, the right things start to happen. When the right things start to happen, it's because you're thinking the right things. You're thinking the joyful, loving expression of life. And that is the simplicity of Jeshua's teachings, is that you are the creator in the here and now. And by coming back to this oneness of the here and now, you are literally expressing into the world your experience. And the brighter you make your experience, the more the people around you will see you as an example and go, hey, what makes you so have such a joyful life? What gives you that joyful happiness? And then you can share that love and show them their own truth. Be the way, the truth, and the life so that they can see the light. Be the way, the truth, and the life so they can see the light, because that's the important part, is you expressing that joyful, loving life for yourself, but also for the oneness of God around you. You know, the more of us that come to this space of realizing we can create a joyful, loving world, the faster that house will look beautiful across the street from me, right? The faster our outer expression will harmonize. And that is bringing heaven to earth. We can bring heaven to earth. Jeshua said that multiple times. We bring the love of God to our experience. We bring love into the world. We bring heaven to earth. And that is the essence of Jeshua's teachings. And you can see by what I'm talking about, using the references of Buddha and Krishna and Muhammad, I'm literally showing you that God is too big to be encompassed by any one school of thought. And what Jeshua and all the enlightened avatars of old were teaching was our oneness with God and God being love. Thank you guys for watching this video. This video has been a long time coming, as I said at the beginning. And it really is something that has been true to me in my life and has worked very, very, very well for me. I'm not asking you to take that belief. I'm not asking you to change anything you're doing. I'm just hoping that you have an open mind so you can see that there might be some truth in this for you. If there is some truth in it for you, follow it. If you found no truth in it, then just discard it. But it really comes down to, what are you believing in your moment? Spirituality is a personal journey, just like my mom said. So it's really up to you to discern whether this is for you or not. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.